What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel, and though it feels kind of weird to say this since I'm recording on a Monday, happy Friday. Today, we're back for another episode of the Inner Sea Region, a 5-minute tour, and today, at the request of one Patrick Gallagher, we're heading into the Five Kings Mountains. With no further ado, let's get underway. Actually, I'll take that back. There needs to be a little more ado because we do need to say that this episode of the Inner Sea Region, a 5-minute tour, was brought to you in part by the one, the only Joseph Harvilla. Joe, as always, thank you for all your help and support. Now let's dive in. The Five Kings Mountains are tall and imposing peaks, rich with ore and iron bloom mushrooms, a fancy delicacy of the dwarves. Heavily populated by said dwarves, they are the largest center of dwarven culture on or beneath Golarion. But it wasn't always this way. The dwarves believe that Torog himself forged the first of them deep in the Darklands during the Age of Creation, where they continued to live and work quite happily throughout the early history of Golarion. Even though they were content in their sunless home deep under the surface of the earth, Torog prophesied that one day the ground would shake and mark the beginning of a great migration to the surface of Golarion. The massive earthquakes caused by Earthfall not only devastated the surface, but shook the dwarves' Darklands tunnels as well. Their priests declared that this was the fulfillment of Torog's prophecy and initiated a mass migration of dwarves to the surface known as the Quest for Sky. Some dwarves refused this call and chose to remain in their ancient cities, and over the millennia, those left behind were transformed by the environment into an entirely new species known as the Druger. This massive movement of people was not without its problems. As they moved closer to the surface, they displaced their ancient enemies, the orcs, causing countless battles and driving the orcs upward onto Golarion's surface as well. The dwarves also squabbled amongst themselves and even erupted into open warfare that stalled their quest to get out of the Darklands and reach the surface of Golarion. It was not until the great king Targic united the dwarves through diplomacy, wisdom, and quite a bit of coercion that the migration was resumed. Upon their arrival, the dwarves discovered that their migration had unleashed a deluge of orcs upon the surface, and we've talked about this already in our Hold of Belkzen video. If you'd like to learn more about Pathfinder's orcs, you can do so right here. In order to better defend themselves from the orcs and to commemorate the successful completion of the Quest for Sky, the dwarves built 10 massive city fortresses known as Sky Citadels. The first and greatest of these Sky Citadels was Highhelm in the Five Kings Mountains, and it was from here that the rulers of Tartargoth started to bring civilization back to a surface that had been decimated by Earthfall. From the safety of their sky citadels, the dwarves drove the orcs into the hills and mountains and then began a rapid expansion of their domain. Coupled with a rapid population growth, this led to their golden age. Of course, nothing lasts forever, and the orcs, once confined to the edge of civilization, gained in strength and began attacking the Sky Citadels under the command of Belkzen. Belkzen conquered the Sky Citadel of Koldukar, which is now known as Urgir. This defeat, coupled with the loss of other Sky Citadels in the subsequent centuries, led to a decline in dwarven power and prestige, and even though Tartargoth continued into the Age of Enthronement, it never really recaptured the greatness it once had. Tartargoth finally collapsed on itself in 1551 AR, leaving each of the 4 remaining occupied Sky Citadels, Dungenhold in what is today the Mana Waste, Yanderhof in Varizia, Kravenkis in the World's Edge Mountains of Taldor, and Highhelm to fend for themselves. As the first and greatest of these Sky Citadels, Highhelm held a special place in the imaginations of dwarven kind, and it was around these great fortress cities that a new dwarven kingdom rose. 5 separate dwarven nations were founded around Highhelm in the Five Kings Mountains, each ruled by one of 5 brothers. A mere 9 years after the founding of the last of the 5 kingdoms, the first of no less than 19 civil wars broke out. Known as the Five Kings War, it lasted 700 years before the kings of the 5 nations finally negotiated the Curse Accord in 2332 AR with the help of a delegation from Druma. This treaty ended the civil wars and began a long-lasting peace, and it's these 5 great kings that give the region its name. In celebration of this event, they carved the likenesses of these forward-thinking monarchs into the sides of the mountains overlooking the important passes in the region. Unfortunately for the dwarves, this peace would only last 160 years before their ancient enemy the orcs invaded the dwarven kingdoms. One by one, the 5 kingdoms collapsed and their great cities fell to their enemy, The only city able to resist was Highhelm. The demise of these other kingdoms brought in what is called the Wild Era, which lasted almost 700 years, and during this time the orcs controlled the Five Kings Mountains, with only Highhelm remaining to defend the dwarven and human civilizations of the area. Khadan the Mighty arrived in the Five Kings Mountains in 3197 AR, and after 82 years of war, Khadan defeated the orcs at the Battle of Split Mist Pass and founded the Empire of Tar-Kadurm. For 500 years, Tar-Kadurm and its cities flourished until Droskar's Crag erupted in 3980 AR, destroying everything Khadan the Mighty had built and forcing many dwarves to flee their ancestral homeland. This event, which to this day is known as the Rending, broke the spirit of the dwarves and marked the beginning of the decline of Tar-Kadurm. King Tauric the Industrious tried to inject spirit and ethics back into his people, but after his death in 4277, the dwarves once again fractured. His cousin Ordric killed him in 4369 AR and attempted to create a theocracy under the dwarf god Droskar. This ignited yet another civil war. This one, known as the Forge War, raged for 13 years, whilst generals loyal to the true crown fought to keep their kingdom united, but failed. Ordric declared himself theocrat and commanded all the dwarves to work in Droskar's name, Droskar being a neutral evil deity concerned with things like slavery and toil. For nearly 100 years, the dwarves of the Five Kings Mountains lost every shred of art and beauty that they once had, as their craftsmanship became merely adequate. Many dwarves fled to the other nearby dwarven settlements, as well as settlements in Druma and in the Mindspin Mountains. But in the end, priests could not maintain their hold on the other dwarves, and Ordric's theocracy crumbled in 4466, with entire settlements abandoned. In the 250 years since Droskar's kingdom faltered, a period which we now know as the Collapsed Era, no single dwarf has been able to unite his people in the Five Kings Mountains. The remaining 4 sky citadels are great metropolises, but really none of them can claim to be more than a city-state. No one has emerged with the will, ability, and charisma to reunite the dwarves of Avestan into a single united people, and I think we're starting to see a theme here because most of Golarion is built this way. Though I'm sure there are several medieval cultures we could draw lines to from the Five Kings Mountains, I for one think it's really cool that nestled in all this historical fantasy, we have a region that is specifically dedicated to an iconic fantasy race. But of course, this is just one man's opinion. What do you guys think about the Five Kings Mountains? Have you ever adventured here? Do you want to take a campaign deep into the ancient ruins of lost dwarf cities in search of treasure? And how do you feel about the dwarves of Golarion being in such a declined state? If you have anything else to add, or as always, if you have any requests, feel free to throw them in the comments below. We'll keep the conversation going. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. The next episode of the 5-Minute Tour drops next Friday.